The first thing I noticed when the Orlith Imperium declared war on humanity was that their light had begun to shrink. Not their stars, not their fleet, their light. Above my desk in the Meridian transfer loom, a living registry membrane stretched across the ceiling like a sheet of dark water. Thousands of engineered cells glowed whenever recognized governments exchanged cargo rights, navigation permissions, medical clearances, tax certificates, or sovereign credentials through the station. Most governments appeared as separate patterns. The Orlith Imperium did not. Its territories covered so much inhabited space that its authentication signature spread across nearly a quarter of the membrane, an immense branching lattice of pale gold that connected hundreds of provincial authorities beneath a single imperial route. I had spent 6 years looking at that pattern. That morning, one branch went dark. Orvik Sen was standing beside my desk when it happened. He noticed my expression before he noticed the ceiling. "What is wrong?" I looked at the administrative display embedded in my workstation. "Nothing yet." His narrow face relaxed. Orlith expressions were subtle. Their species had pale blue skin with darker metallic bands along the temples, and when they were pleased, those bands flattened. Orvek's were almost smooth. "Then perhaps you should look less alarmed," he said. "That would be easier if your government hadn't just fired on ours." "They have not fired on you." The station announcement chose that moment to contradict him. A calm synthetic voice sounded through the loom. "Confirmed hostile action against human sovereign infrastructure. Continuity review initiated." Nobody screamed. That was the strange part. The Meridian transfer loom wasn't a military station. We had cargo brokers, customs clerks, medical couriers, freight pilots, food inspectors, maintenance crews, arbitration assistants, and several thousand passengers waiting to transfer between vessels. People stopped walking. Heads turned toward the ceiling. The vast golden pattern of the Orlith Imperium pulsed once. Then another branch vanished. Orvek stared upward. "What did your system just do?" "Our system? You administer the loom." "I administer continuity registrations. I don't control the network." His metallic temple bands tightened. "That distinction is irrelevant." "It's becoming extremely relevant." He stepped closer. Orvek was not a soldier. Officially, he was the Orlith compliance representative assigned to Meridian, because the Imperium moved so much cargo through the station that someone from the imperial bureaucracy was permanently required to verify jurisdictional disputes. In practice, he spent most days reminding everyone that Orlith certificates overruled provincial ones. He had never been rude about it. He had never needed to be. The Empire itself supplied the arrogance for him. My terminal chimed. A line of text appeared. Imperial Authority Scope updated. Orvek leaned over my shoulder. "What does that mean?" I opened the jurisdiction header. The Orlith signature had lost several peripheral systems. "They've reverted." "Reverted to what?" "Their local authorities." "That is impossible." "No." I looked at him. "It's actually the default." He gave me the same expression people gave technicians when a machine said something obviously absurd. "Nor those systems belong to the Imperium. Their governments belong to the Imperium politically. Their continuity identities are independent. Under Imperial authorities. Until Imperial authority fails validation." His eyes narrowed. "Fails?" I didn't answer immediately. Because my screen had started a clock. 10 minutes. I had never seen that particular countdown outside training simulations. A thin white line appeared at the top of the display. "Reciprocity breach review active." My stomach tightened. Orvek saw it. "What is that?" I swallowed. "The reason you should contact your government." "I am already in contact with my government." "Contact someone higher." His mouth curled slightly. "You do realize who I represent?" "Oh yes." "Then explain." I looked at the gold pattern overhead. Another section blinked out. "Your empire has 10 minutes to stop attacking humanity." Orvek laughed. Not because he found it funny. Because the alternative was believing me. That is not how sovereignty works. That's not what the timer is measuring. Then what is it measuring? Continuity. He stared at me. I turned my screen toward him. The Meridian system displayed a chain of authorization layers. Commercial identity, customs interoperability, navigation trust, bonded cargo enforcement, cross-jurisdiction requisition, emergency transit, central taxation authority, military logistics priority. Most of it had nothing to do with humanity. That was important. The network had not been created to control governments. It had been created because the galaxy had a paperwork problem. Before the Continuity Accord, interstellar trade could take days to authenticate. One planet called a medical emergency certificate one thing, another called it something else, a third required biological verification, a fourth required hereditary seals, and a fifth refused every standard invented outside its atmosphere. Humanity had arrived late to galactic civilization and looked at the mess with the kind of horror normally reserved for infectious disease. So we built a translation layer. Not political translation. Administrative translation. One government could issue a certificate in its own legal structure. The network verified who had issued it, what jurisdiction it applied to, whether that authority remained valid, and how another jurisdiction should interpret it. It was boring. It was spectacularly boring. Which was why everyone adopted it. The Orlith Imperium had adopted it faster than most. Their empire was ancient, but ancient empires accumulated bureaucracy the way old ships accumulated corrosion. Provincial governors maintained different systems. Subject worlds used inherited legal codes. Military districts had overlapping authority. Local tax registries contradicted imperial ones. The Continuity Accord let the Imperium make all of that behave like one machine. Orvek pointed at the display. You are telling me Earth can revoke our access? No, that is exactly what you are telling me. No, humanity cannot revoke peaceful access. Yet our authority is disappearing. Because of the reciprocity clause. He said nothing. I watched recognition move across his face slowly. He knew the clause. Everyone who worked in compliance knew it. Almost nobody thought about it. That clause concerns hostile seizure of Accord infrastructure and coercive use. Our fleet did not seize this station. The clause isn't limited to this station. I expanded the text. The legal language filled the display. The Continuity Accord had one ugly, carefully written safeguard. No participating authority could use shared authentication privileges to conduct a war of territorial expansion against another participating authority, while demanding that the network continue enforcing its external jurisdiction. In simpler words, you could use your own systems to conquer whoever you wanted. You could not use everybody's shared systems to make conquest easier, and still demand that everybody treat the conquered territory as yours. Orvek read in silence. His bands went rigid. This is an obsolete interpretation. No, it has never been enforced. It has never been triggered. You built a weapon into civilian infrastructure. That made me angry. Not enough to raise my voice. Enough to become precise. No, your government signed a contract. His gaze snapped to mine. A contract humanity wrote. A contract your legal ministry edited for almost a year. His expression changed. Only slightly. I continued. You demanded the anti-fraud protections. You demanded sovereign route recognition. You demanded stronger provincial binding, because your governors kept issuing contradictory cargo seizures. You demanded automatic continuity so an imperial order would remain valid across every subject jurisdiction without being re-verified manually. He stared at the screen. You benefited from that system for decades. That does not give Earth the right. Earth isn't doing anything. Another chime. A new notice appeared. Central Requisition Authority partial. The golden membrane overhead contracted again. This time the change was large enough that people across the loom gasped. Orvek looked up. A group of glowing branches detached from the imperial lattice. They did not disappear. They changed color. One became greens, another white, another deep violet. Separate jurisdictions. Separate governments. Still there, just no longer beneath the imperial root. Orvek whispered, put them back. I can't. You are the registrar. I verify continuity, I don't manufacture it. Then verify the Imperium. I am. And I looked at the results. Your government is still attacking mine. The first real panic came when the cargo lanes stopped obeying Imperial priority. A freight supervisor called my desk from Dock Meridian South. Nor, I have an Orlith naval requisition claiming precedence over civilian medical cargo. Which jurisdiction? Imperial. Local origins. He gave me the system. I checked it. The system's light had separated from the Orlith pattern less than a minute earlier. Request local confirmation. The Imperial certificate says I don't need local confirmation. It used to. The supervisor stared at me through the screen. Behind him, cargo drones hovered around a sealed military container. What do I tell the Orlith officer? The truth. Which truth? That his order is readable, authentic, and no longer valid there. Orvek heard everything. His hand tightened around the edge of my desk. Imperial military authority supersedes provincial approval. Inside the Imperium. It is inside the Imperium. The membrane flickered. The province in question brightened independently. I pointed upward. The network disagrees. The network does not define political reality. No, I met his eyes. It records who currently possesses recognized authority to act. That is political reality. Exactly. For the first time since the countdown began, he had nothing to say. Across the station, similar conflicts multiplied. An imperial tax seizure failed in a mineral jurisdiction. A navigation restriction reverted to local control. A food convoy previously reserved for a military depot was released by the planetary authority that had produced it. A passenger carrier that had been denied departure by Imperial Command received clearance from its own home government. Nobody was rebelling because humanity had asked them to. That was the part Orvek could not understand. He kept searching for the human order behind it. There must be a directive. There is. There must be a command layers. No, someone is instructing these provinces to reject imperial authority. They don't have to reject it. Then why are they doing so? Because they can choose. He stared at me as if I had spoken nonsense. Then his wrist communicator flashed. He answered immediately. The image of an Orlith official appeared above his hand. I recognized the insignia of the Imperial Continuity Ministry. Representative Sen, the official said, restore Meridian authentication. Orvek glanced at me. I am attempting to. The official noticed me. Human registrar. Identify yourself. Nor Haldens. You will suspend the reciprocity process. I can't. You administer a major continuity node. A node isn't sovereign over the protocol. We are aware of how the system functions. I almost told him that the last few minutes suggested otherwise. Instead I said, then you know what terminates the review. The official's jaw hardened. Our armed forces are conducting a defensive operation. My display immediately marked the statement against verified combat telemetry. The attack had struck a human communications and rescue installation along a recognized border corridor. No disputed territory. No accidental crossing. No ambiguous identification. The Imperium had announced its demand before firing. Humanity was to surrender several newly settled systems and accept Orlith supervision of further expansion. The military record could not have been cleaner. Your operation is classified as territorial coercion, I said. By human standards. By the language your government signed. The official looked past me at something off-screen. We are initiating sovereign override. My blood went cold. Don't. Orvek turned toward me. The official's eyes narrowed. What did you say? Do not initiate a sovereign override while the hostile action is active. You presume to advise the Imperial Continuity Ministry. I'm advising you because I know what the Accord does next. We will not allow foreign civilian software to invalidate the authority of the Emperor. It isn't foreign software. It was designed on Earth and maintained by signatories from all over the galaxy. We possess an Imperial root. Oh yes, then we will assert it. Don't. The transmission ended. Orvek watched my face. What happens if they do? I looked at the countdowns. We were not halfway through yet. They prove the breach is intentional. There were old jokes about human engineering. Most of them involved excessive redundancy. The Continuity Accord was not human engineering in the physical sense, but we had brought the same paranoia to its architecture. No single government controlled it. No single station could shut it down. No single capital could rewrite the record. Authority changes propagated only when independent validators agreed that the rules had been satisfied. The Orlith had loved that when it protected their empire from provincial forgery. They liked it less now. The sovereign override arrived. For less than a second, the entire living membrane above Meridian turned gold. It was breathtaking. Every independent jurisdiction swallowed beneath the imperial pattern. Orvek inhaled sharply. His shoulders relaxed. There. I stared upward. Wait. The membrane flashed white. Then darkness swept across it. Every light vanished. The entire station seemed to freeze beneath the black ceiling. A child somewhere near the customs lanes began crying. Then the membrane relit. Not as one gold empire. As hundreds of separate patterns. The Orlith lattice had shattered. Orvek's face emptied. My screen filled with notices. Coercive root assertion detected. External imperial binding, suspended pending local REAUTHORIZATON. Subjurisdiction sovereign credentials restored. Orvek. He didn't answer. Orvek. His eyes remained on the ceiling. What have you done? Nothing. You said the empire would shrink. It just did. You destroyed it. No. His head turned sharply. Look at that. I am. Those worlds are imperial territories. They are now individually authenticated governments. Because humanity broke the imperial root. Your ministry asserted the root during an active coercion review. Because you were taking our authority away. No, my voice came out harder than I intended. The system was asking your government to prove that the authority was still reciprocal. His breathing slowed. I pointed to the membranes. Your empire used shared infrastructure to make hundreds of governments act as one jurisdiction. The moment your ministry demanded that the network enforce that unity through coercion, the network stopped assuming consent. Consent. The word seemed to offend him. They are subjects. Oh yes. They are governed. Oh yes. They do not individually consent to every imperial order. That is exactly why the system is asking them now. His communicator erupted with incoming signals. So did mine. Every formerly subordinate government had just received a choice. Reauthorize imperial cross-jurisdiction authority. Or do nothing. Some reauthorized immediately. A cluster of gold returned overhead. Orvek almost smiled. Then another province declined. Then another. A major shipbuilding system remained independent. A food-producing region rejected imperial requisition. Several inner systems restored commercial recognition, but not military authority. Others restored customs cooperation while withholding taxation. The empire was not collapsing like a building. It was coming apart like a machine whose components had discovered they were not welded together. Orvek whispered, "They cannot do this." They just did. They will be punished. By whom? He stared at me. I regretted the question as soon as I asked it. Not because it was cruel. Because he had no answer. Imperial fleets still existed. Imperial troops still existed. But fleets needed fuel. Fuel required requisition. Requisition required recognized authority in the jurisdiction supplying it. Ships needed navigational clearance through sovereign relay zones. Occupation garrisons needed food shipments, payroll transfers, replacement parts, medical certification, local transit privileges. The Orlith military had not vanished. Its ability to behave as the military of one enormous state was disappearing beneath it. Orvik received another call. This time he answered privately. I could not hear the speaker. I did not need to. His face told me enough. No, he said. A pause. No, the Meridian Registrar cannot restore it. Another pause. I understand. His eyes closed. No, Minister. I cannot compel a local validator to recognize imperial jurisdiction. He lowered his communicator. What happened? He looked at me. One of our primary logistics worlds refused reauthorization. I said nothing. They have supplied the Western Fleet since before your species had electricity. Still, I said nothing. They cannot simply decide they are no longer responsible. That is what they decided. What else can it mean? It means they are deciding whether the Western Fleet is theirs. That hurt him. I saw it. Until that moment, Orvik had treated the collapse as a technical malfunction. Now it became personal. He had grown up inside the Orlith Imperium. Not the homeworld. One of the provinces. He had once told me that his family considered imperial citizenship the greatest achievement in their history. The Imperium had ended wars, built gates, standardized medicine, suppressed piracy, connected isolated systems. Empires rarely survived for centuries by being nothing but evil. That would have made this easier. Orvik stared at the independent lights overhead. My people chose the Imperium. Then they can choose it again. He looked at me. That was the first moment he truly understood. Not the system. The danger. The countdown continued. The Empire did not need every province to refuse. It only needed enough of them to stop behaving like provinces. The Imperial Continuity Ministry changed tactics. They stopped demanding restoration. They began negotiating. That transformation occurred so fast I almost missed its significance. The first request came from the Imperial capital to a transit jurisdiction that controlled a chain of high-capacity gates. It was phrased as an order. The network rejected it. The second was phrased as an emergency directive. Rejected. The third arrived as a request for temporary military passage. Accepted. Orvik read the authorization twice. They granted it. Oh yes. Then they still recognized the Emperor. Maybe. Obviously. Read the conditions. His eyes moved downward. Passage only. No requisition. No troop disembarkation. No seizure of civilian capacity. Recognition valid for a limited emergency window. Orvik went silent. That is not obedience, I said. He did not look at me. No, it was the first time he admitted it. A former imperial subject had negotiated with the emperor. Not rebelled. Not attacked. Negotiated. As one government to another. The membrane reflected the change beautifully. The transit jurisdiction did not become gold again. A thin gold bridge appeared between two separate patterns. Agreement, not ownership. Across Meridian, station traffic began changing. Cargo manifests that had once listed AURALITH Imperium as destination authority now carried local government names. Customs fees rerouted. Passenger documents revalidated. Trade contracts that had depended on central imperial guarantees were suspended, rewritten, or transferred. The boring machinery of civilization adjusted itself. That was the human part people would misunderstand later. They would tell stories about how humanity destroyed an empire without firing a shot. That would be wrong. Human forces were fighting at the border. People had died. Ships had been damaged. The Orlith had chosen violence. And humanity had not destroyed the empire. Not really. We had built a system long ago that asked a simple question whenever someone used shared authority. Do the people beneath this permission still recognize the issuer? For decades, the answer inside Orlith space had been assumed. Now the assumption had expired. A message arrived on my console. Priority Human Government Channel. I opened it. No admiral appeared. No president. Just an exhausted continuity coordinator named Mara Ven, calling from Earth. North, I'm here. Meridian stable. For now, civilian service. Operational. Do not interrupt it. I wasn't planning to. Even for Imperial jurisdictions. I hesitated. Understood. Medical, food, evacuation, and life support continuity remain protected. Military privilege stays subject to review. Understood. She looked away at another screen. Then back. The Orlith have requested we disable reciprocity enforcement in exchange for a ceasefire. My throat tightened. And government response is being transmitted now. Which is ceasefire first. Of course. Not surrender. Not reparations. Not humiliations. Stop shooting. Then the review could end. I closed the channel. Orvex had heard. You could restore the Imperium. If your fleet stops. And if it does, the active breach review terminates. All authority returns. No, he stared at me. No, the automatic suspension ends. That is the same thing. No, I looked at the constellation of independent lights above us. The local governments would still decide what they reauthorize. His voice went very quiet. So even if the Emperor stops the attack, the old assumption doesn't come back automatically. Then this is permanent. I don't know. You do. No, Orvek. I meant it. I know how the protocol works. I don't know what your former provinces will choose. He looked upward again. For the first time, I wondered whether he was looking for his birthplace. The final phase began with a message from the Emperor himself. Not to humanity. To everyone. The meridian membrane dimmed as the transmission propagated through recognized channels. The Emperor appeared across public terminals throughout the station. He was old by Orlith standards, his metallic temple bands almost completely silver. He wore no armors. He sat beneath the seal of the Imperium. My governors, he began. The network immediately annotated the address. Several recipients were no longer recognized as governors. The Emperor continued. Our civilization faces an external attack upon its unity. Around me, humans and aliens watched in silence. The administrative systems upon which we rely have been manipulated to separate our worlds from their lawful government. My jaw tightened. Orvek looked at me. Do not, he said softly. What? Argue with a screen. Despite everything, I almost smiled. The Emperor's voice filled the loom. You are instructed to restore all Imperial permissions immediately, reaffirm your oaths, reauthorize fleet transit, requisition, taxation, and security jurisdiction. The Imperium has protected your worlds for generations. It requires unity now. For several seconds after the transmission ended, nothing happened. Then one system reauthorized. Gold. Another. Gold. Orvek's eyes brightened. A third restored only trade. A fourth restored judicial recognition. Then a block of inner provinces returned almost completely. The imperial pattern began rebuilding. I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because I wanted the empire restored. Because choice meant choice even when people chose the thing I would not. Orvek noticed. You are pleased. They answered. They obeyed. Some did. More signals arrived. A major agricultural territory declined military requisition. A manufacturing jurisdiction offered civilian exports at market rates, but rejected compulsory imperial seizure. A border province declared neutrality. A cluster of subject worlds issued a joint temporary compact, not against the Imperium but apart from it. Then Orvek's home system responded. He stopped breathing. The living membrane above us produced a narrow silver-white pattern. Independent. A message followed. Commercial recognition, Imperial accepted. Cultural compact, Imperial accepted. Central taxation, Imperial suspended. External military requisition, Imperial declined. Local sovereign authority retained. Orvek read every lines. They did not leave. No, they did not return either. No, his hand trembled. They kept the cultural compact. Oh yes, my mother will be happy about that. The comment was so ordinary that it nearly broke me. I looked away. The Empire was dying around us, but somewhere on Orvek's world, his mother was probably watching the same lights and worrying about festivals, schools, trade, relatives, history. Civilizations were made of ordinary concerns. So were empires. The countdown entered its final stretch. Then the border fade changed. Human channels reported that Orlith forward batteries had stopped firing. For 1 second I thought it was over. Then a second report appeared. The fleet had not withdrawn. It had paused. Orlith Command was demanding immediate restoration before disengagement. Mara then called again. They're trying to make restoration a ceasefire condition. Orvek stepped into view. Let me speak. Mara looked at him. Who are you? Orvek Sen, Orlith Compliance Representative. You have authority. He hesitated. Months earlier he would have answered instantly. Now he checked his credential. The result hovered over his wrist. A URLITH home jurisdiction, recognized. External Imperial Representation, limited. His expression twisted. I have enough. Mara waited. Orvek said, tell your government the fleet cannot withdraw cleanly. Why? Transit. I understood before she did. He continued. Several jurisdictions have revoked automatic naval passage. If the fleet begins immediate withdrawal, parts of it may become stranded between recognized corridors. Mara's face hardened. Is that a threat? No. Orvek looked exhausted. It is the opposite. He turned to me. Nor can temporary withdrawal corridors be validated without restoring Imperial military jurisdiction. Oh yes. Under whose authority? The local governments controlling each route. He closed his eyes. Of course. The Empire now had to ask permission to retreat through territory it had ruled that morning. Mara spoke carefully. If the Orlith cease hostile operations and request withdrawal transit, humanity will support protected passage. Orvek opened his eyes. No attack during withdrawal. Not if they stop firing and comply with the corridor terms. He nodded once. I will transmit that. The call ended. He sent the message. Then we waited. Above us, the living membrane continued glowing in separate colors. The great Imperial gold remained, but smaller now. Much smaller. The timer approached its end. An incoming Imperial request hit Meridian. Not an order. A request. Emergency withdrawal corridor recognition. I stared at it. Orvek stood beside me. They accepted. Looks like it. Then the war is over. Not yet. I checked the border validation. Human stations confirmed weapons shutdown. Local jurisdictions along the retreat path began issuing temporary transit. One by ones. Not as Imperial subjects. As governments. The fleet began turning away from human space. The reciprocity breach status changed. Hostile action terminating. The countdown kept moving. Orvek looked at me. Why hasn't it stopped? Because the ceasefire has to propagate through independent verification. You built delay into it. We built confirmation into it. He made a sound halfway between annoyance and despair. That may be the most human sentence you have ever spoken. This time I did smile. The timer entered its final seconds. No one in Meridian spoke. Somehow the whole station seemed aware. Cargo loaders stood beneath suspended containers. Pilots watched from boarding lanes. Customs officers leaned toward displays. Passengers looked upward. There was no cheering. No human flag. No fleet victory fiat. Only bureaucracy. Beautiful, terrifying bureaucracy. The timer reached its end. T+10:00. The membrane went dark. Then it rebuilt the political map from current recognized authority. Hundreds of patterns appeared. Independent governments. Regional compacts. Trade unions. Temporary defense agreements. Former imperial jurisdictions connected by new lines. Near the center, a small gold pattern emerged. Orvek stared at it. My console chimed. One final header loaded. A URLITH home jurisdiction only. That was all. No explosion. No capital burnings. No emperor dragged from a throne. No species erased. The homeworld remained. Its moons remained. Its people remained. Its ships remained. Its language, history, temples, schools, families, songs, and cities remained. But the entity that had attacked humanity 10 minutes earlier no longer possessed recognized authority beyond its original sovereign territory. The Orlith civilization was alive. The Orlith Empire was gone. Orvek lowered himself into the chair beside my desk. For a long time he said nothing. Then he looked up at the separate lights. I used to think those colors were disorder. I sat beside him. What do you think now? He took his time. Expensive. I laughed before I could stop myself. He gave me a tired look. Hundreds of custom systems, separate transit treaties, local tax structures, negotiated military passage. Do you understand how much work this is going to create? I looked at the screens filling with requests. I'm a continuity registrar. He considered that. Then, for the first time that day, his temple bands loosened. Of course you are pleased. I'm never pleased by additional paperwork. That was a lie. It was. A final request appeared on my workstation. Origin, Orlith home jurisdiction. Destination, a former imperial subject. Purpose, renewal of civilian food transit guarantees. The system asked whether the sender possessed automatic imperial authority. I selected no. It asked whether the receiving government had agreed to negotiate. A green confirmation appeared. Yes. Above us, the living membrane responded. A thin golden line extended from the small Orlith pattern toward a distant violet light. It stopped halfway. The violet government answered. The line connected. Not conquest. Not obedience. Agreement. Orvek watched it happen. For generations, his empire had treated connection as proof of possession. Now connection required 2 lights. I closed the 10-minute timer. And the meridian transfer loom went back to work.